Imagine this scenario. You hear the unmistakable sound of glass shattering downstairs in the middle of the night. Adrenaline spikes as you grab your trusty 9mm carbine, load up a 33-round magazine filled with premium defensive hollow point ammunition, and step cautiously into the dark hallway. You acquire your target, squeeze the trigger, and instead of a defining crack, the gun locks up, completely leaving you entirely defenseless. That nightmare scenario is not just a paranoid fantasy, it is a documented geometric reality for several platforms dominating the market today. Today we are taking a hard, unfiltered look at 7 tactical pistol caliber carbines that completely betray their own spec sheets when they are pushed past the casual range day. I highly recommend you pay close attention to the platform sitting at number 5 because its complex rotating barrel requires a strict maintenance schedule that could inevitably get you killed in a high-stress situation. Before we dive into the specific firearms, we need to establish an objective understanding of what actually makes a pistol caliber carbine unreliable. The core issues almost always stem from bad geometry and tolerance stacking, which inevitably collapse under the intense mechanical stress of sustained fire. The pistol caliber carbine market currently suffers from a massive honesty problem, driven by a review ecosystem that optimizes for engagement and initial impressions rather than long-term mechanical accuracy. Subjectively, a gun might feel great for the first 50 rounds, but objectively, the truth only reveals itself around the 500-round mark. Stick around until the very end because I am going to prove exactly why even a premium $1,300 price tag cannot hide a fatal design flaw. Number 1. Kriss Vector. We have arrived at the number 1 spot, featuring a gun with a marketing premise that was easily one of the most compelling stories in the modern firearms market. The Kriss Vector utilizes the Super V operating system, which is an angled rotating mass located below the barrel, specifically designed to redirect harsh recoil energy downward. This was not pitched to consumers as a marginal update. It was boldly presented as a fundamental rethinking of standard firearm physics. Ranging from $1,300 to well over $1,500, it is by far the most expensive platform on our entire list today. The promise was a genuine engineering breakthrough, offering significantly less muzzle rise and blistering follow-up shots. This specific performance advantage was heavily meant to justify the massive price gap separating it from every other 9mm or 45-8 CP carbine on the rack. That promise is incredibly specific, but the documented field record is equally specific, and the glaring gap between those two realities is exactly why the Vector takes our number 1 spot. Years of competitive shooter data and independent extended testing reveal a consistent, undeniable truth. Objectively, the Super V system's recoil reduction is indeed real, but it is absolutely not the category redefining breakthrough the marketing materials described. Multiple independent tests clearly place the Vector's actual felt recoil and overall muzzle rise right alongside standard blowback platforms that cost less than half its premium price. Subjectively speaking, while the follow-up shot advantage does exist, it is incredibly narrow, far too narrow to properly justify paying the premium. What was sold to the public as a total revolution is, in stark reality, just an incremental mechanical improvement tightly wrapped inside a highly demanding and complex maintenance schedule. The Vector's core claim wasn't completely invented, rather it was massively amplified. It technically does what it says it will do, it just doesn't do it anywhere near the degree that a $1,300 price tag inherently demands, and that fact represents the widest, most expensive gap between marketing promise and actual high round count reality. Number 2. Kel-Tec SUB-2000 Gen 2. On paper, this check every single box a serious PCC buyer could ever look for. It offers 9mm chambering, a 16-inch barrel, blowback operation, and highly accessible street pricing sitting right between $500 and $600. It confidently entered the market with genuinely one of the most compelling promises in the entire category. Kel-Tec offered a carbine that accepts incredibly common Glock 17 or 19 magazines and has the unique ability to fold entirely in half to stash discreetly in an everyday backpack. Turning your existing Glock ecosystem into a cohesive two-platform system is a highly practical, real-world argument. Here is exactly where the documented evidence completely shatters that dream. The singular engineering decision that defines the entire platform, the folding mechanism, routes the primary optic rail directly through the main hinge point. Consequently, to fold the carbine for its advertised storage, you must completely remove your optic. Let's be real, practically every serious PC buyer today runs a red dot optic. That objective fact means the platform's biggest selling point is functionally incompatible with real-world tactical use, unless you are willing to drop significant extra cash on aftermarket hardware designed specifically to bypass the factory design entirely. This is not merely a subjective user complaint, it is a heavily documented engineering oversight that was present since the day of release. Kel-Tec only bothered to properly fix it in the subsequent Gen 3 revisions. That ultimately means every single Gen 2 buyer who wanted a folding gun had to either accept a heavily compromised optic setup, buy expensive aftermarket mounts, or simply own a folding carbine they couldn't actually fold. Look at the Ruger PC carbine again. Its takedown design achieves that exact same compact storage profile while maintaining a fully functional optic rail during both deployment and storage, often at a highly comparable or even lower price point. If you own a Gen 2 and had to actively work around the optic issue, you spent your time and money solving a problem the manufacturer explicitly created and the marketing department deliberately ignored. Number 3. Palmetto State Armory AK-V. The manufacturer made their marketing comparison incredibly explicit. They promised genuine AK pattern reliability scaled down into a 9mm pistol caliber platform. Visually, it checks out, boasting long stroke aesthetics, a familiar AK fire control group, and a rugged stamped steel receiver, all wrapped around a closed-bolt 9mm blowback design. The marketing team leaned heavily on firearms heritage, pushing the ideas of legendary AK reliability, 9mm practicality, and pure consumer value. Sitting at a price point between $800 and $900, the pricing implied that this platform had finally crossed the invisible line separating budget guns from legitimate, hard-use tactical tools. However, the documented field record is far more complicated and disappointing. Independent extended testing alongside sustained community data reveals a platform that was heavily plagued by meaningful early production quality control variants. Fitment inconsistencies between the receiver and the barrel translated directly into severe functional issues when the guns were run at high volume. Objectively, feeding reliability varied so wildly from one serial number to the next that it became entirely impossible to judge the platform as a whole. Purchasing one felt more like a gun-by-gun gamble than a sound tactical investment. Furthermore, the magazine system showed a documented sensitivity to magazine quality, something the rugged AK heritage promise completely failed to prepare buyers for. The stamped receiver absolutely screamed AK pattern ruggedness, but the internals delivered nothing but standard 9mm blowback variability. The professionals who evaluate these platforms for a living know exactly what I am talking about. The launch day, reviewers simply hadn't run the round count high enough to see the flaws yet. That massive gap between unit-to-unit quality and true category reliability is the AK-VS exact failure mode. Number 4. Freedom Ordnance F.X.9. When you serve the current market, you see premium pistol caliber carbines hovering around the $800 mark. Then you see the F.X9 sitting comfortably between $500 and $600, aggressively positioning itself as the ultimate value choice for anyone heavily invested in the Glock ecosystem. The sales pitch is strong. Consolidate your 9mm ammunition. Easily share magazines with your everyday sidearm. Get a highly capable ADR pattern carbine without paying those premium MPX prices. Objectively, when you run the first 3 magazines, the gun feels absolutely right. The 9mm blowback action is naturally snappy but remains highly controlled, and the inclusion of an lock handguard is genuinely useful for modern tactical setups. But here is the specific, heavily documented gap embedded deep within this platform's DNA. Independent extended evaluations, backed by sustained competitive shooter data, reveal a massive, unavoidable flaw. There are highly measurable failure to feed rates, specifically when using hollow point ammunition. Once you cross the 500-round mark, specifically when you are running 33-round magazines loaded to full capacity, the feed angle geometry creates a heavily documented stress point. Standard pressure defensive hollow points sitting at the very bottom of a fully loaded magazine encounter the chamber differently than standard round nose ball ammunition. My personal assessment is that this is absolutely not a simple break-in issue. It is a rigid geometric reality that was present in the design long before the first unit ever shipped to a customer. If you plan to rely on this platform for anything beyond shooting standard capacity range ball ammunition at cardboard targets, this flaw matters immensely. The F.X.9's field history consistently fails to match the expectations of a reliable defensive weapon. If you bought this gun based purely on the marketing hype and felt that reliability gap completely open up around round 500, I want to validate your frustration. That is not a user error, that is an information problem. Number 5. Beretta CX4 Storm. This placement is going to rustle some feathers because the firearm community genuinely loves this gun, and forums will defend it fiercely. Personally, I completely understand why it has such a cult following. For the first several hundred rounds, the CX4 Storm genuinely delivers on every single promise it makes. It is a 9mm carbine with a 16-inch barrel, weighing in at just over 5.5 pounds unloaded, making it remarkably light and agile. Beretta brought massive engineering credibility to a category that was heavily dominated by crude blowback designs. It features a clean synthetic aesthetic, fully ambidextrous controls, and seamless compatibility with Beretta 92 series magazines. However, The absolute headline feature was its rotating barrel action, heavily marketed as a massive tactical advantage meant to reduce recoil and reliably feed any type of ammunition. Ironically, that exact credibility is what makes its real-world performance so incredibly surprising once you finally push past the 1,000-round mark. Nearly 2 decades of sustained owner data and independent testing consistently show a glaring flaw. That rotating barrel design, while objectively interesting from a mechanical standpoint, introduces an incredibly complex cleaning process. This creates a completely predictable failure mode when shooting at higher volumes. The locking mechanism requires precise disassembly steps that casual users consistently get wrong. As a result, the platform's reliability becomes completely dependent on absolutely flawless maintenance. What the marketing department confidently called a reliability advantage actually becomes a massive tactical liability out in the field. This extreme sensitivity to owner maintenance is nowhere to be found in the brochure. You only discover this fatal flaw at round counts where a more forgiving action would simply sail through without a single hiccup. If you want a subjective comparison, look at the SIG MD PEX, which delivers comparable weight but holds a significantly more maintenance-tolerant record at high volume, proven time and again during direct law enforcement field evaluations. This gun failed for reasons the community actively chose to rationalize. Number 6. Just Right Carbine. Stepping up in price, we encounter a failure that is not about budget constraints, but rather about a small manufacturer making an engineering decision that looked incredibly clever on a drawing board but completely failed in practical application. At a price point sitting around $400 to $500, you expect a platform that has solved the inherent problems left behind by its cheaper predecessors. The Just Right Carbine, heavily marketed across 9mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, and 45 A8CP, positioned itself as the ultimate thoughtful solution for buyers who wanted a working takedown design alongside genuine magazine flexibility. The promise was incredibly clear and objectively appealing: buy one single platform and run it seamlessly with the Glock or M&P pistol magazines you likely already own. That represents a real practical value argument for anyone looking to consolidate their gear. Unfortunately, this exact feature is where the documented failure mode begins. The J.R.CS takedown system, combined with its modular magazine compatibility, objectively demands incredibly tight manufacturing tolerances. Sustained community records and independent testing consistently show that those essential tolerances vary wildly. We see documented feeding issues, specifically struggling with defensive hollow point ammunition across multiple calibers. I need to emphasize that these are not just isolated break-in problems that smooth out over time. They are consistent, structurally significant patterns caused directly by the geometry between the feed ramp and the chamber throat whenever you swap between different magazine platforms. The very flexibility that sold the carbine is what created a reliability complexity that the spec sheet completely hid. Modular design inherently means more mechanical interfaces, and more interfaces mean a higher risk of tolerance stacking. Tolerance stacking is exactly where this platform's practical field performance violently crashes into its on-paper promise. The engineering decision that created the J.RCS failure mode was entirely predictable from day one. Number 7. Hi-Point 95T. When we look at the broader market, most platforms oversell their capabilities. The Hi-Point 995TS, however, did something remarkably different. It barely sold itself at all, relying instead on its rock-bottom pricing and a bold promise. Sitting at an incredibly accessible price point of around $350 to $400, this carbine features a 9mm chambering, a 16-inch barrel, simple blowback operation, and proprietary 10-round magazines. Objectively speaking, at 6.5 pounds unloaded, the firearm is incredibly front-heavy. This reveals a polymer skeleton that was clearly never meant for balanced tactical handling. The brand's actual promise heavily targets buyers on a strict budget, offering peace of mind through an explicitly honored lifetime warranty. To give credit where it is due, the 95TS does boast a functional reliability that often surprises shooters who initially dismissed it based purely on its incredibly utilitarian aesthetics. However, my subjective assessment shifts when we look at the long-term data. The platform earns its place on this list due to well-documented manufacturing issues found across independent testing. We are talking about varying receiver tolerances, distinctly gritty full travel triggers, and a proprietary feed system that completely ruins the concept of 9mm logistical consolidation. These are not just typical budget-tier flaws, they belong to a platform whose rock-solid warranty strongly implied to buyers that the engineers had already solved these fundamental issues. The disappointment lives right in that gap between warranty confidence and manufacturing consistency. Buyers expecting mechanical consistency across high round counts found a platform that functions, but does so incredibly inconsistently. The warranty essentially fixes problems one gun at a time, rather than addressing the core issues at the design level. For a subjective comparison, look at the Ruger PC Carbine, which sits in a similar price neighborhood but objectively delivers documented high-volume reliability, proving that budget 9mm challenges can actually be solved. Ultimately, this analysis proves that the Pistol Caliber Carbine market doesn't necessarily have a quality problem. It has a massive honesty problem. That dynamic will only change when consumers stop blindly trusting 50-round review videos and start demanding the absolute 500-round truth. And honestly, have you ever purchased a piece of tactical gear that completely fell apart once you took it past the casual range day?